Afternoon. Now a little while ago I reviewed the film Justine by the Marquis de Sade. Now he didn't make the film obviously because they didn't exist back then. But when I watched it I thought this isn't as bad as it's been made out to be. But then I stumbled upon the book just to see if it was as bad as everyone makes out. Now this edition is from 1964 and it has an introduction by Alan Hull Wharton. I wonder what he's going to write about. Now bear in mind this was written in France in 1797, so hopefully it's not too difficult to read. Let's find out. Well, that's the introduction done. The introduction by Alan Hull Wharton. Now, for a book that's 279 pages long, was it really necessary to have a 86-page introduction about the book you're going to read? No. It's essentially just setting up what a terrible book it might be for you delicate readers. But also, bearing in mind this book was written in 1797 and its introduction was written in 1966, half of that introduction is talking about a well-known leader from 1930s Germany. It's basically saying because Hitler enjoyed reading, he definitely read Justine, and because this book is apparently full of sadism, that must have influenced Hitler, or he would have enjoyed this book had he read it. Now, I don't know yet because I've not read the book, so unless Justine is forced to shoot herself with a bendy gun, dance on an electric floor, or is put in a cage with a bear and an eagle, I'm not sure what the connection is. Obviously, if something is bad in a book, it must be because of Hitler. Even though Hitler wasn't around then, I'm sure he had more important things to do than read what is essentially French porn. Anyway, now for the actual book. Well, that was an interesting start. So the book actually started with an introduction, another one, by the Marquis de Sade himself, essentially apologising for the story he's about to tell. He's saying that it's unfortunate he has to share the downfalls of virtue. And then in the first chapter, Justine and her sister Juliet are kicked out of the convent because their dad's dead, and they're sent off with 100 crowns. Her sister goes off to be a slag. She is the Bonnie Blue of the pair, whilst young Justine goes to meet Monsieur de Bourg, B-O-U-R-G, who doesn't have his way, but instantly thinks the only thing that she can do, because she's 12, bear that in mind in this book, is do some tidying up and get rogered. Now, despite this book being apparently very graphic, and thankfully it's not given her age, he doesn't have his way because he cannot get it up. So she escapes without having any bedroom twister, thankfully. Now it doesn't describe him not being able to, but you can read between the lines and know what he means. Anyway, what's going to happen next? Now she's escaped Monsieur de Bourg. Well, that certainly was an interesting chapter and very eye-opening. She just met Monsieur du Harpin, who lives with his wife in a house. I'll read her own description for you. My new master was an old usurer who had become rich not only by way of lending money, but also by robbing everyone with whom he came into contact, whenever he found it possible to do so safely and with impunity. Now, I don't know what the Marquis de Sade meant by usurer, who liked lending money and regularly referring to the stuff she has to do for extra as interest. No, he doesn't have his way with her, and neither does his wife, and they are so tight that they have to light their house. They don't have to, they choose to. They light their house using street lamps from outside just shining through the windows. Now they set her up to be a thief, and then she's off to be hung and then she goes to prison, and that's where she meets her friend who we saw in the film. Her friend, La Dubois, a beastly woman who's literally guilty of every crime there is. Now they set fire to the prison and they've escaped. I wonder what's going to happen next. Thankfully nothing too bad has happened to her, other than someone trying to roger her and having to live with the well, you can't read it all on one day. So now she's escaped the prison with Dubois and the bandits, who go around just committing crime. Now, Dubois says the reason they commit crime and why the poor commit crime is because of the rich, who have 3 times the amount of money that they need, whilst the poor people have none. So what else is there to do other than not be virtuous and commit crime? That is a very black way of looking at things. Dubois says that she should join the gang of bandits. However, Justine doesn't want to, for obvious reasons, so the 4 of the bandits decide that they want to play bedroom twister with her. And, as they're about to, she pleads with Dubois and says, please make them stop, and she says, alright, I will. So she makes them stop, and then they say, actually, we don't need to listen to you, woman, we're going to give her one anyway. But then they fight over who's going to give her one first, so while they're fighting over who's going to give her one, she escapes. Luckily for Justine, she gets away without any bedroom twister. But then, when hiding, she comes across some more bandits. One of those bandits being Monsieur de Brezac with his friend. Yes, they're the other type of bandit. So after Justine is forced to hide and watch them do things, they then find her, and then, pleading with her, he then takes her back to the house to meet his mum. Now his mum needs a new servant, and Justine and her form quite a good relationship together. She slags off her gay son to Justine. Justine has a kind of affection for the old gaylord, even though he's an absolute arsehole to her. But she stays there for 4 years, so 4 years without any trouble. De Brezac decides he wants to kill his mum for her money. De Brezac says that mums aren't really of any use because everything comes from the dad. Justine tells his mum what he said, and naturally she's very upset, so she wants him nicked for trying to poison her. Now Justine is obviously not going to poison her because she's virtuous, so de Brezac does it instead. So as punishment for Justine not killing his mum and him having to do it himself, he has to whip her 100 times against the tree. But then he sends her on the way with some money, so it's not all bad. Anyway, what's going to happen next? It can't get any worse than that, surely. Well, that's taken a turn, much like the weather. So after escaping from de Brezac, she went and found a man called Rodin, who was a doctor and a teacher, and helped her with the scars from the whipping. Now Rodin had a daughter, who she became friends with, and Rodin, as I said, was also a teacher, and he was a very specific teacher, as he only wanted kids that were attractive, not in a Nazi sense, but he didn't want any kids with deformities, only perfect people, which, you know, you can understand to a degree. However, her misfortunes continued because Rodin was using this to do experiments on people, which led to another note in the book by Alan Hole Wharton referring back to Hitler, of course, because he obviously did experiments on the perfect people as well. And through all the shenanigans, she finds out that Rodin and his doctor mate are due to experiment on his daughter, Rosalie, an experiment which ends in her being dead. However, Justine informed Rosalie about what was going to happen and then escaped. Luckily, no one was experimented on, although his daughter probably was, because Justine just fucked off out of there and ran off. So after running off, she's run to a monastery, surely a place of sacred sanctity, where someone as virtuous as her will be in no trouble at all. However, this monastery is like a fortress. Once you're in, you can't get out. I wonder why they would need that. Well, because she gets holed up with 3 other girls in a room, with the 4 monks that live there, who decide to show Justine the other fruits of life that many people have been trying to up to this point in the book. Now the descriptions have stepped it up a gear, so you are left in no doubt as to what's going on. Every evening there's a gangbang. Someone's getting bummed, someone's getting gobbled, and someone's getting the old bedroom twister too, including Justine. Her virtuousness, whilst is still there, her virginity isn't, and she's very sad about it, understandably. Now the Marquis de Sade was an atheist and absolutely hated religion, which is very clear, making out that nice priests and monks are all just rapists in disguise. Now I know what you're going to say, but however, in general, that's not the case. This isn't railing against certain aspects of churches and other religions, but just religion in general. No wonder Napoleon wanted this fucker locked up, and did so for 13 years. Now at the moment she's still trapped in the monastery, looking for a way to get out, and we are coming to the end of the book, the last few pages, because I think like the last 20 is more conjecture by Alan Holwarton. I wonder if he's going to mention Nazis again. Now what I didn't mention earlier is that she's actually recounting this story to a young woman and her husband who she's met at a pub while she's waiting to go and get executed, or tried at least. Now because she is recounting this story to a couple in a pub, it means she escapes the monastery alive and unharmed. Well, kind of unharmed. They are very fond of the stage door here in France. Je t'aime. Je t'aime. Oui, je t'aime. Well, that is the end of Justine by the Marquis de Sade. So, she got out of the monastery because the chief of the monastery, the chief monk, was given a job as head of the church in Sweden. And then someone else came in to take over and said, "What the fuck is going on here? Have some money, girls. Get out." So then she went on her way, and then she met a man called Dorville, who had been trampled by some horses, whom she deemed nice enough to help, because she's a virtuous girl, as we know. So she helps him, nurses him back to health, and he says, "Because you've been so kind, why don't you come and work with me back at my house, with me and my missus?" So she's like, "Oh, alright then, I'll go." The minute he gets there though, or the minute they get there I should say, he suddenly changes and gets her to work in a pit chained up naked with 2 other girls, as he's collecting gold illegally. So as they're looking into the pit, we get an idea of just what he's like. Dorville then seized the horsewhip, which was always kept near us, and with all the strength of his arm gave us 5 or 6 lashes over every part of our body. "This is how you will be treated here, you lazy slut." I bet she's glad she saved him now. However, she does have a woman moment as she's in the pit with the 2 naked other women. Amongst all the whipping, the dirt, and being forced to do work, she says their figures were pretty and well turned, and one of them still possessed superb hair. Well, that's alright then, Justine, as long as they got good hair as they're being whipped. She then asks Dorville why he does this, and he makes a fairly interesting point. Inequality is a natural hierarchy, and helping the unfortunate doesn't really help them, it just makes things worse. I paraphrased about 3 pages of rambling French nonsense there, but basically he's saying, why build wells for Africans? Because all it's going to do is get filled up with dirt. You're not going to get anything out of it except more Africans. He doesn't say that, but I think that's what he means. However, she escapes Dorville's house when he goes off to Venice with all his newfound money, and it's taken over by someone else, a nice man who brings them into the house so they can work indoors, coin clipping. But eventually she leaves. She leaves and goes and stays at an inn with a nice woman who she helps at a bakery. However, there is a fire at the bakery, and in it the woman goes to save herself, but not her kid, who's left in the bedroom, Justine goes to save the kid herself. However, as she does, the house collapses and the kid dies. The woman sees Justine holding the kid as it dies, blames her for the death, and then gets her nicked. So then it brings us to the point where she's talking to the two people at the pub, all ready to go onto the scaffold, which means being hung. At this point, we realise the man and woman she's been talking to is her sister, the slaggy one, who has now made a new life for herself with this rich, important fella. And the rich, important fella has very high contacts and gets Justine cleared of all wrongdoing because none of it was her fault. She was just being virtuous. So, then Justine goes off to live with her sister and her rich fella in a big house, gets nursed back to health, and lives happily ever after. Until one fateful night, when during a thunderstorm, her sister gets Justine to go and shut the windows because she's too scared of them. So as she's doing it, lightning strikes Justine through the breast and kills her. The end. Is it a good book? It's a very well written book. By that I mean it's a lot better written than much of the shit that comes out nowadays. Is it bad in terms of graphic? No, not really. Again, not in terms of, or in comparison to the books of today, which are far worse and far more detailed. You know exactly what's going on with this without the minute descriptions. This you could easily leave around if you have youngsters in the house and they wouldn't have a clue what they're all talking about. But the main theme is, of course, is virtue bad? Of course it's not. It's good to be religious. It's good to be virtuous and do nice things for people. Not necessarily expect anything in return. Certainly not expect to get defiled. Does being virtuous spell disaster for you? Well, in some cases, yes. We see many people going on about how virtuous they are. They're so virtuous in helping these people come and live in their house. They end up dead. Oh, we're so virtuous, we love everyone. We're going to go to a third world country. Everyone's nice, nothing bad will happen. We know what happens. So there is a point to that. And the point he does allude to in this book is that people who make themselves out to be virtuous often fuck up because of their stupidity. What he doesn't do is put common sense and being virtuous together, because you could be a nice person whilst also not being a fucking idiot. Because you can be virtuous or a good person without being stupid. We know the risks, and even back then this cunt knew the risks too, but he doesn't really put two and two together. Anyway, it's time to find another book. I shan't be reading the other one in this series, which was all about Juliet, because that's about 1,000 pages long, and there's only so much you can read about women being bummed in France. So until next time, ta-ta for now. Remember, stay away from coin clippers. Something occurred to me after I finished this, and I can't be asked to put my camera on because I'm hungry. The book starts off in Paris and she makes her way all the way down to southern France over the course of about 10 years. If this book was written now, she wouldn't make it out of Paris, and she wouldn't make it past 2 days of walking around the Eiffel Tower. We know why. The book would have been considerably shorter, and he certainly wouldn't have given her any money to go on her way. Ta-da for now. If you enjoyed this video, or thought it slightly less shit than Justine's life, you can always buy us a Cuppa on Ko-fi. The link's in the description below, and thank you in advance if you do.